Good morning, Canada. Welcome back to June 6th. Oh my God, every day. I know I say it every day. I say the date, but I am just blown away that we're June, January, February, March, April, May, June. Where the hell has time gone? Welcome back to June 6th question period. We have a brand new episode scheduled for today. Pierre Poilievre is, of course, going to be making an appearance as per his schedule. Justin Trudeau's not there. He's over at Juno Beach making a bunch of speeches about how soldiers fought for our rights and freedoms and how he, in 9 years, is destroying all of that. So great job, Justin. Before we get into the stream, I do want to encourage everyone to smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already. Guys, it really helps the channel. It helps push the live streams out. If you care about Canada, then I encourage you to do those two things. They're absolutely free to do because it's only benefiting us Canadians by giving it more of an opportunity for more eyes to see what's going on so that people can make educated decisions when it comes time to vote. And without further ado, we're going to get into statements by members. I encourage everyone to go get themselves a coffee, get yourself situated, because you're not going to want to miss this. It's going to be a good episode. Here we go, folks. Here we go.
Saturday in Midland, we will celebrate these little sugar pies as tens of thousands of enthusiasts will descend upon downtown in search of the perfect tart. They come in every shape, size, taste, and color. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to butter tarts, you might say diversity is our strength. But come early and bring a cooler because we will start with 200,000 butter tarts, and by the end of the day, not one will be left standing. So on this Saturday, come join us in Midland to celebrate the butter tart, satisfy your sweet tooth, and Mr. Speaker, let's bring the butter tart home.
The honourable member from Willowdale.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with a heavy heart, but with much admiration, to pay tribute to a member of the medical community of Toronto. On May 26th, Dr. Abbas Hadian, a remarkable physician and a distinguished leader of the Iranian Canadian community, passed away. For over 40 years, Dr. Hadian provided health care to countless patients by operating a bustling medical practice and by serving at North York General Hospital. He was passionate about medicine, passionate about people, and passionate about his family. From the youngest child to the oldest of seniors, Dr. Hadian treated every patient with exemplary care and with good cheer and humor. I don't think it would be an exaggeration to say that he was among the most widely known and admired members of the Iranian community in Toronto. I'd like to thank his family for having generously shared Dr. Hadian with countless patients and wish them well during this particularly difficult time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Pierre Les Patriotes, Verchères. Last week, more than 500 people in Verchères gave some much-needed love to the Quai de Verchères. For nearly 30 years, the Quai de Verchères has been abandoned by the federal government until access to it was condemned in the wake of the pandemic. The citizens of Verchères find it hard to understand why, in the middle of the historic heart of their village, the federal government has allowed this much-loved wharf to languish. The citizens of Verchères find it hard to understand why Ottawa has money for all kinds of meddling and frivolous spending, but no money for their wharf. The citizens of Verchères find it hard to understand how the federal government can give lectures while neglecting its own infrastructure. After almost 30 years, the citizens of Verchères have run out of patience and are no longer satisfied with notices from Fisheries and Oceans Canada. The citizens of Verchères are tired of being ignored. They pay taxes like everyone else. They exist, they value their wharf, and they deserve to be heard by the federal government. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The consequences of suicide extend far beyond individuals. Suicide causes waves of grief in families, friends, and communities.
So let's make it medically assisted.
Is our comprehensive and evolving plan to combat suicide in Canada. Suicide prevention requires collaboration between all levels of government, partners, and society as a whole. With With them, we are committed to improving data collection and monitoring, promoting research, and providing services to Canadians when, how, and where they need them, and maintaining our collaborative work. We must collaborate to have a greater impact. We need to work together to save lives. And remember, if you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, call or text 988. You're not alone. Help is available.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, more explosive testimony from the ArriveCan scandal. Yesterday, committee heard from Min Doan, the CBSA vice president, who's at the center of this controversy. Not only was he the person responsible for hiring GC Strategies, it's also alleged that he deleted 20,000 emails pertaining to Arrive scam. When pressed on the issue of the lost emails, he said that he changed the battery from his computer and poof, 20,000 emails gone. How convenient. We also received text messages of a conversation he had with a colleague about his committee summons, admitting he can't throw ministers under the bus, and there is a gap between what he wants to say and what he can say. There is still a dark cloud of secrecy that hangs over our Arrive scam. Who is Mr. Doan protecting? Who is he covering for? Conservatives will continue to ask the tough questions to get to the bottom of this boondoggle of a scandal.
The honourable member from Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise in tribute to a resident of Kitchener-Conestoga, Stan Smurthwaite, a Royal Navy signalman who on D-Day...
Let's see if we can get a couple hundred likes, folks. If you haven't yet, I'd encourage you guys to hit that little thumbs up button.
Amphibian invasion ever assembled, an operation that changed the course of history. Signalman Smurthwaite, affectionately known as Steady Light by his D-Day comrades, risked his life to deliver ammunition to the brave soldiers storming the beaches of Normandy. Stan and others were a beacon of courage among the chaos of war. In 2019, Stan traveled to France for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. Unfortunately, he did not live to witness today's 80th D-Day commemoration, passing earlier this year at the age of 98. Stan was the last D-Day veteran in Waterloo region. So let us not forget our veterans' sacrifice, courage, and indomitable spirit, and keep veterans like Stan etched in our hearts and memories, reminding us that freedom is not free, it is earned. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, the 12th Annual Arctic Inspiration Prize took place in Whitehorse earlier this month, continuing the celebration of people working on groundbreaking projects from around northern Canada. Congratulations to the Yukon's Young People's Theatre Festival and the Youth Coalition for Food Security in the North, who each took home $100,000 to continue their projects. Feikilaniti received $499,000 for their efforts, offering recovery and wellness programming, balancing both traditional knowledge and Western practices to support real healing from the opioid crisis. Congratulations as well for the $500,000 prize to the Therapeutic Farm School, a wonderful farm-based project, horses included, that lights up the world for neurodiverse youth. These are some of the brightest lights from the Yukon, celebrating with Northern brothers and sisters in a show of innovation and excellence that we in the North are rightly proud of. Congratulations to all who took part in the AIP, and thank you to the many sponsors who make the prizes possible. Together, you're changing lives and communities in the North. Thank you.
The honourable member from Brandon-Souris.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians understand that the carbon tax is not an environmental plan, but rather a tax grab by this NDP Liberal government, and it makes everything more expensive, causing higher inflation and the cost of living crisis. When they tax the farmers that grow the food and the truckers that transport the food, they inevitably increase the cost of food for all Canadians.
We don't know if Randy is going to be in the House today.
The government has refused.
If he is, though, it's a bit of a bloodbath.
We were right all along, and is desperately trying to hide the evidence. Recently, our Conservative team asked the independent parliamentary budget officer whether the government had conducted an analysis, an economic analysis of the cost, and he confirmed that they had. However, the NDP Liberal government is blocking the release of the analysis, placing a gag order on the budget watchdog. Mr. Speaker, Canadians demand transparency. This Prime Minister must stop hiding the real cost of his inflationary carbon tax and release their report.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury.
Last month, I had the pleasure of joining attendees for the inaugural Rainbow Connections Conference in Sudbury. The conference brought together members of the 2S community as well as seniors, older adults, elders, and allies from across Northern Ontario. It was a chance to celebrate, discuss, and also to learn from each other on how we can do more to support the 2S community, especially seniors. Protecting the rights of 2S people is how we build a more inclusive Sudbury and a more inclusive Canada. As allies, we must continue to do our part to ensure we are creating safer and more supportive communities. Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate Pride Month, I want to thank members of Squad Sudbury and the Réseau Access Network for organizing this important conference. It was a timely discussion that holds much promise for much needed change. Thank you.
The honourable member from Barrie Innisfil.
Today marks the 80th anniversary of Canadian forces bravely storming Juno Beach to defeat the Nazis in the fight for freedom, human rights, and human dignity. 124 Royal Canadian vessels, 10,000 sailors, 39 Royal Air Force squadrons, a total of 14,000 Canadians took part in D-Day with our allies. C'est un jour.
It is a day that changed lives and history forever. 359 Canadians lost their lives on that day so that millions could be liberated from Hitler's control and Nazism. Today, we honor and thank our fellow Canadians.
Yet they invited a Nazi into Parliament.
Air, on land, and at sea, under incredible circumstances and with a bravery that none of us, except those who were there, will ever understand.
We will always be indebted to this generation of brave Canadians and their families. Their determination will forever be remembered. Their story must never be forgotten, and their cause should serve as a reminder to all of us that sadly, in these times, the forces of hatred still exist. On behalf of a grateful nation, I say thank you from the bottom of our hearts for their courage, their sacrifice, and their results on this day 80 years ago that changed the course of history. We will remember them.
The honourable member from Saskatoon University.
It's hard for Canadians to keep track of all the Liberal scandals, and every week they add new ones. This is a scandal that would define any other government.
Yeah, how about Veterans Month?
Canada.
I see that in the chat.
Talking about the mysterious.
Nah, that's too patriotic, man.
Who they claim is not the same person as the Minister of Employment and the former.
They would rather make
of Finance.
Immigrant Month.
These aren't the droid.
Newcomers Month.
But this is the Randy they are watching and looking for. The minister holds 50% share in a global health imports and wants us to believe that this is the Randy was just some guy who nobody knows the last name of and who just happens to have some big ideas about the company that everyone took seriously. Who's Randy? Where's Randy? Who got rich and why? Canadians deserve to know. It's time to give up on the cover-up.
The honourable member from Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago today in London, Ontario, a normal Canadian family was killed in a terrorist attack. They were targeted because who they were, visibly Muslim. Yumna Afzal was a student. Her mother, Madhia Salman, an engineer.
Red Rover, we call Randy over. I did not have that on my bingo card today.
After a terrorist.
That's a good one. I forgot about that.
Into this innocent family. This attack terrorized an entire community across our country. They were just out for a walk. When my family went for a walk, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder. It shattered the sense of safety we all take for granted. This is terrorism. This is Islamophobia. We all have a responsibility to do better. Hate doesn't exist in a vacuum. As leaders, we must bring people together and not stoke fears of those who are different. And we must remember our London family. All
right, this is going to be weird for everybody. but hold on one second.
Member from Nunavut.
Hi, sweetie.
I rise
My daughter's watching.
to happy occasions, knowing that June is Indigenous Peoples History Month. Sadly, I stand to write that still exists. There are too many of us that are losing to alcohol abuse. There are too many that I represent in Nunavut and to those Indigenous peoples outside of Nunavut that are affected from alcoholism. There are too many of us losing to alcohol. I am told, for instance, that $16.7 billion go towards national health burdens like addressing diseases, disorders, and cancers due to alcoholism. We know in Ottawa that the Inuit population has reached about 5,000. Unfortunately, too many Inuit are disproportionately represented when it comes to substance-related deaths. I am aware that the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction work in partnership with Ottawa Public Health and Inuit service providers. They recommend implementing the Canadian
At least buy us dinner if you're going to call us that.
issues. I remind my fellow Inuit to stand strong, to help and love each other even during the hardest of times. You can help. You can ask for help and make sure to have a hopeful future.
The Honourable Member for Saint Jean. We mark this year the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings. Our duty of remembrance is first to all those soldiers who took part, those who are still with us, those who have left us, and those who fell in battle, often without history remembering their names. It took courage for the young men of the day to land on the beaches of Normandy under Nazi fire and to continue relentlessly, even to the point of having to step over the bodies of their fallen comrades in arms to advance until the enemy was vanquished. From our comfort as a nation at peace, let us always be grateful to those who gave everything to preserve our freedom. And let us always remain on the right side of history, defending freedom and democracy today. To all those soldiers who have passed on, to all those veterans who are still with us, who have seen the horrors of war and paid the price of their dedication all their lives, thank you. I remember.
All for Trudeau to fuck it up in 9 years.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Shepherd.
The NDP Liberals poison and corrupt everything they touch. They inherited a green government program with a clean bill of health from the Auditor General in 2017, and then they took it to the depths of corruption only the NDP Liberals are capable of. The Auditor General found that Sustainable Development Technology Canada is now a slush fund for NDP Liberal swindlers with $123 million awarded corruptly, including $76 million funneled to projects connected to the Prime Minister's friends. Conflict of interest policies were not respected in 90 cases. That's $76 million spent corruptly. A secret recording from a senior government official described the slush fund's actions, and I quote, as a sponsorship scandal level kind of giveaway. Another $59 million was allocated to projects that didn't meet the slush fund's own rules. Another $12 million was spent on projects that were in a conflict of interest and were ineligible for funding. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost nor the corruption. So we're calling for the release of all the documents for this slush fund. Would they let the sunshine in, call the cops, or do we need an official inquiry?
Keep my name out your mouth. I heard sunshine. No.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton, Canso.
Mr. Speaker, I'm excited to rise today to celebrate the 37th anniversary of the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. Since 1987, Mr. Speaker, ACOA has been a real game changer for our local economies here in Atlantic Canada, whether it's creating jobs, supporting small businesses, or funding innovative projects. ACOA has been there every step of the way. Mr. Speaker, in my riding of Cape Breton, Canso, ACOA has helped start and kickstart so many important initiatives. ACOA's work in diversifying our economy and promoting sustainable development has really put Atlantic Canada on the map, both nationally and internationally. A big shout out to all the hard-working folks at ACOA and their partners. Your dedication has made a huge difference in the lives of so many Atlantic Canadians. as we celebrate this milestone, Mr. Speaker, I'm excited about what the future holds. Cheers to 37 years, fantastic years of ACOA, and to many more years of growth and success for Atlantic Canada.
Oral questions. Questions orales. Honorable Andrew Scheer.
Mr. Speaker, governments from countries that are hostile to Canada, who actively try to harm our citizens and our country, interfered with the most fundamental aspect of our society, our democracy. An intelligence report claims that there are members of this House whose loyalty is not solely to the people of Canada, but to foreign governments who wish us harm. And what has been the Liberal response so far? They won't release the names. And now the Liberal member for Pickering-Uxbridge says, quote, boo-hoo, get over it. Instead of telling Canadians to just walk it off, why don't they release the names of MPs who are working against Canada?
Yeah. It's literally
The Honourable
treason.
Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my friend from Regina Capel knows very well that no government is in a position to release sensitive information about particular pieces of intelligence. I have a suggestion.
Are you part of it, Dominic?
Seats away in this place from his leader, if they were sincere in understanding some of the information underlying the public version of the report of the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians, his leader could avail himself of the offer that I'm happy to reiterate again today, to get the security clearance, get all the information that the Committee on Parliamentarians had, and then he could come to a reasoned judgment in this place.
Once he sees it, he has an NDA and he can't talk about it.
This isn't about offering secret briefings to MPs who have to keep all that information secret. It's about releasing the names so that Canadians can know which MPs are working against the interests of Canada. So I've got a very simple question. He should be able to answer this one. Do any of the MPs listed on this report of compromised members who are
they in the House today?
Canada, do any of those MPs currently sit in cabinet, yes or no?
Good question.
It's a pretty straightforward question.
Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'll give full points to my friend from Regina Capel to try and get me to do indirectly what he knows very well I can't do directly. Mr. Speaker, I'll remind our friend that our government is the first government to take this issue seriously.
Nope, first government to be this compromised in a G7 country.
To secure our democratic institutions, in spite of public warnings from CSIS for the last 2 years they were in government. I worked last summer with my friend from Regina Capel to set up the Hogg Commission, for example. We look forward to Justice Hogg's recommendations and would be happy to work with him in terms of implementing them.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, they sat on warnings from our intelligence agencies so that they could protect their own partisan interests. And they have refused to hand over cabinet confidences to the Hogg Commission. But this one should actually be really simple. Cabinet ministers get to see everything. They get a say on everything the government of Canada does, and they get to personally lobby the Prime Minister any day they want. Can the minister assure Canadians that nobody who sits around the cabinet table today is on this list of compromised MPs who are working against Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our friend from Regina Capel should know very well that our national security and intelligence agencies, including the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, take all of the issues of national security very seriously. And Mr. Speaker, our friend should know very well that our government has taken more than any other government steps to ensure that our democratic institutions are protected, and he should have confidence that we'll continue to do that work, something that his previous government did absolutely nothing about.
Zero. Nothing about. Zero.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable.
Man, these people are so corrupt.
Cabinet knows it. They know the names. Just like they knew that the Chinese Communist Party had intervened in the nomination process for Don Valley North. NSICOP revealed that members helped foreign state actors. The Prime Minister knows who those MPs are. For partisan reasons, he protected the member for Don Valley North. Is that why, once again, today, he's refusing to reveal the names? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Well, Mr. Speaker, my colleague is a serious parliamentarian. He knows that according to Canadian law, no one is going to disclose that information that he's claiming to be so interested in. But I have a suggestion for him. We offered the leader of his party, and we're still ready to do this, we offered to give him access to the information, the intelligence, under the National Security and Intelligence Committee's report. This is information that under legislation is kept confidential. We can share it with him if he really wants to know what's happening. The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Well, Mr. Speaker, a pregnant woman who was trying to bring her child to childcare was chased around in the street by a woman who was screaming at her. That was in Montreal.
Wow.
She said she was incredibly scared, and that's what it's like in Montreal after years of this lax Liberal government. This government lets people go on home arrest or on bail instead of putting them behind bars. Will this government refuse to grant exemptions for supervised injection centers near schools and childcare centers? Yes or no?
Clear. We always put a lens of public health and public safety on everything we do in addressing this deadly overdose crisis. But in that frame, Mr. Speaker, also be clear, the safe consumption site in Montreal is managed and run by the province of Quebec. It is under their jurisdiction. Any proposal that comes to us, there was no Montreal proposal on our table, but anything that comes to us, we want to make sure kids, families, and communities are safe while we save lives.
L'honorable député de La Prairie.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, the National Security Committee has stated that members here in this House are under foreign influence. That's very serious.
Absolutely, it's serious. It's treason.
Refused to address the topic. She seemed completely uninterested in discussing this, even when the NDP asked questions on the same topic. Our democracy is under attack. And yet, the Deputy Prime Minister doesn't care at all. If an elected official is working for foreign interests, not for the interests of Canadians, they need to be shown the door. It's very serious. What will the government do to fix the situation? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for La Prairie for his question. I'm happy to explain that our government, since 2015, has created a series of measures. And we have continued to develop those measures as the situation changes, based on expert advice, arm's length reviews. We have brought before Parliament a very important piece of legislation on this. I greatly appreciate the Bloc Québécois support in order to bring in more measures to protect our institutions. We will continue to do that.
We're going to keep hiding people that should be in jail.
It's time to take action. People are getting more and more worried. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, what has the government done? What has it brought in to do something about the fact that there are members here in this House who are collaborating with foreign powers? It's done nothing. We're seeing nothing done. And when we raise the problem that our democracy is under threat, the answer just ends up talking about interest rates and the Bank of Canada. It's not serious. This government needs to start taking democracy seriously. The Honourable Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope that all members in this House take democracy seriously. People who are lucky enough to be elected here to serve their constituents in Canada take democracy very seriously. And that's why I'm very pleased to work with my colleague for La Prairie. For example, in creating the UG Commission, I appreciated the work we did together, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the UG Commission says in its report. I'm looking forward to passing bills like C-70.
With the censor people?
Bills will enable us to stand up even more strongly against foreign interference.
From Edmonton, Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, border workers keep Canadians safe. They're critical to keeping illegal firearms out of the country and protecting our border. But when it comes to their pensions, CBSA workers aren't treated like other public safety officials. CBSA employees are relying on the minister to keep her promise and give fair retirement benefits. When will the minister treat CBSA officers fairly and offer them an equitable pension so that they can get the respect they deserve?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by saying that we are committed to reaching a deal that is fair for employees and for Canadian taxpayers. That deal will be reached at the table, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to negotiation, but negotiation is a process of give and take, and we are more than willing to make concessions, but we expect that to happen on the other side as well. 90% of Border Services workers are essential. That means they have the responsibility and duty to provide uninterrupted services, but I will reiterate the best deals are made at the table, and that's where we will remain until a deal is reached. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, the UN Secretary General has asked nations to bring in higher taxes on oil companies, but this Prime Minister and his Minister of the Environment don't care. Meanwhile,
point of order.
wildfires are ravaging our communities. It's hotter and hotter. People are suffering because of the climate crisis. Meanwhile, big oil companies are raking in record profits. And when this idea was proposed to raise taxes on them, their lobbyists said no, and the Liberals just crumbled under the pressure. Why are the Liberals letting these companies do whatever they want while the planet burns? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. I believe, like him, that Canada needs to do more to fight climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. That's why we're the only country in the G20 to have eliminated subsidies to oil and gas companies 2 years before the deadline. This week, we also announced a $130 million fund with the Canadian Federation of Municipalities to work with municipalities throughout the country to improve climate resilience. We know we need to do more, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
Canadians know that the carbon tax is costing them in a big way, but what the Liberals are covering up is just how much. But there's this secret report that is out there. It's in possession by the budget watchdog, except he's under a gag order by this Liberal government, so he's not able to reveal exactly what it shows. It's time to stop that cover-up. So will the minister quit using his ludicrous talking points that mislead Canadians and finally release the report so that they can know just how much the carbon tax is costing them?
Yeah. Billions. It's costing us billions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we've been clear all along, and the Conservatives are really the only people that continue to mislead Canadians, particularly on the case with the PBO report, Mr. Speaker. The PBO released a report on April 17th which indicated that they've actually overestimated the economic impact of the carbon tax, which re-emphasizes the fact that Canadians get more back than they pay through carbon pricing. Mr. Speaker, on July 15th, Canadians will receive their next installment of the Canada Carbon Rebate, reaffirming our commitment to lowering our emissions and fighting for affordability every step of the way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Lethbridge.
My question was about the gag order that's been placed on the Parliamentary Budget Officer. He has been prevented from releasing the report that is in his possession. But that's no surprise to us because, of course, we know that the Liberals appreciate transparency about the same way they appreciate an enema. But the budget watchdog would like to release this report. Just ahead from the Liberal government. So would they finally agree to be transparent with Canadians, let the sun shine in, and have the report made public?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, let's do a little history lesson. The PBO once said 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off under this pollution pricing scheme. Flash forward to today. The PBO says 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off under this pollution pricing scheme. You know where they're not better off, though? In that member's constituency, where the Premier increased gas prices by 13 cents a litre, and I don't see her in front of her constituency office protesting.
The Honourable Member from Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, sunlight and transparency, that's what Canadians were promised. Yet after 9 years, here we are at the heart of another Liberal cover-up. This time the government has been caught red-handed putting a gag order on the Parliamentary Budget Officer. The Liberals don't want Canadians to see the secret report that proves that Canadians pay more for the carbon tax than they get back. Will the government end the carbon tax cover-up and lift the gag order on the Parliamentary Budget Officer, or are they just going to tell the PBO and all Canadians, boo-hoo, get over it?
Yep, like they freaking did.
Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Screw these friggin' corrupt Liberals.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We respect the work of the Parliamentary Budget Officer on this side of the House. They provide independent analysis to the government and to Canadians, and Canadians rely on that information for insight into how these programs impact our economy and their pocketbooks. But Conservatives are misleading Canadians. Our government will continue to support the PBO to fulfill the role of his office, but what this report correctly confirmed is that 8 out of 10 families receive more money back through the Canada Carbon Rebate than they pay on the price of pollution, Mr. Speaker. And on July 15th, the Canada Carbon Rebate will be arriving in mailboxes and bank accounts.
The honourable member from Red Deer Lacombe.
Mr. Speaker, sunny days have given way to a cover-up craze, but Canadians instinctively know the true cost of the carbon tax. They feel it when they fill up at the pump. They feel it when they go get groceries. Our farmers know it when they get their energy bill. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer also sure knows it, and that's why this Prime Minister put a gag order on him. If the government won't admit what Canadians already know, then why not let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election? What are you afraid of?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the history lesson. The PBO once said 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off under this carbon pricing program. Flash forward to today, the PBO says 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off under this pricing program. In that member's riding, it got even better, Mr. Speaker. The rural rebate, despite the vote of the honourable member, against his wishes, is doubling. On July 15th, as my colleague just says, why doesn't he talk to Premier Smith about her oppressive gas pricing in Alberta?
The honourable member from Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are weary and their bank accounts bare. People are tired of being gaslit by this Prime Minister. Canadians already knew that the carbon tax costs more than Liberals care to admit, but now it sounds like that the government also knew better. That's what the Parliamentary Budget Officer said at committee. The government has damning data that they won't let him release it. It's time for the Liberals to quit using these unbelievable talking points. When will they release the secret report that confirms that Canadians were right all along?
Yeah.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, over the summer, Conservatives could consider taking a math class to brush up on their Conservative math, because it just really doesn't seem like Conservative math is adding up these days. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives from Saskatchewan and Alberta should talk to their premiers, who jacked up the price of gas on April 1st by over 13 cents, Mr. Speaker. There's no Canada Carbon Rebate for provincial gas tax, and there's no rebate for excess oil and gas executives taking home millions and millions of dollars in pay. But, we've said it before, and I'll say it again, Mr. Speaker, who needs an oil sands lobby when you've got the Conservative Party of Canada in this House?
The honourable member from Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the gaslighting continues over there. Those wacko talking points show just how desperate the NDP Liberals are to cover up the true costs of the carbon tax. Here's what the budget watchdog said. The government has economic analysis on the impact of the carbon tax itself. We've seen that, the staff in my office, but have been told explicitly not to disclose it and reference it. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is gagging the budget watchdog as he bankrupts Canadians. So I'll ask it again. When will he release a secret report that confirms that Canadians were right all along?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, once again, a little bit of a history lesson. The PBO used to say 8 out of 10 Canadians were better off, more money in their pockets as a result of the carbon pricing program of the government, including in Saskatchewan. Flash forward to today. 8 out of 10 Canadians, according to the PBO, are better off, including in Saskatchewan, but bonus, double the rural rebate starting on July 15th, Mr. Speaker. He should talk to his Premier and tell him to start rebating consumers in Saskatchewan.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean.
God, these people are the worst.
Quebec no longer appropriately welcome asylum seekers. That's what the Immigrant Community Support Center said. The director of the center spoke about families with kids living in their cars or crammed into studio apartments. The director of the center said these people deserve a minimum level of dignity, but they're not getting it, especially with the housing crisis. When will the federal government finally understand that by delaying action on this, they are actually causing a humanitarian crisis? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, I have met with a number of organizations in Montreal that are doing their best to host asylum seekers and help them. They often tell me they don't get a lot of money from Quebec, even though we are giving $5.2 billion to Quebec. That's how much we've spent since 2015. Yes, we can do more, and that's what we're doing. I have just met with my provincial colleagues, and we will continue to work hard on this. The Honourable Member. Once again, here's what the director of the center said. She said, we might need a bit more balance when it comes to distributing asylum claims between provinces. Mr. Speaker, she's perfectly right. It's very unfair that she and other community organizations in Quebec are having to carry this entire burden. It's not fair that people like her are having to tell families that need help, that they can't help them because Ottawa has abandoned them and they don't have the resources. Enough is enough. No more discussions. When will there be action? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, we've invested $5.2 billion in Quebec, and yet there's not accountability. Quebecers should be asking more questions about this. And what's very clear as well is that we need to do more. The director that my colleague quoted, who was quoted in the newspaper, is right. We need to better distribute asylum claims throughout the country. That's what we're doing. Just half an hour ago, I left a meeting on that exact topic. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Plenty of meetings, but no action. And while the minister does nothing, on the ground, meanwhile, community organizations can't find housing for families. They're having to put people on wait lists for food baskets. Can you imagine having to explain a wait list to a hungry child? Now, the Prime Minister and the Premier will meet on Monday. Quebec is asking for asylum claims to be better distributed and is asking for $1 billion to be paid back. Will the Prime Minister of Canada leave that meeting with the check signed and with a date to start better distributing asylum? The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Well, if my colleague wants an answer to that, he will have to wait until Monday like everyone else. Now, this Bloc Québécois, they've been asking for asylum claims to be processed more quickly for 6 months, and yet yesterday, the smart Alex in their party were standing up at the Finance Committee to say the opposite. There's complete inconsistency here. It's really baffling.
The Honourable Member from Chatham, Kent Leamington.
The budget watchdog has released a report stating what Canadians already know, that they pay more in carbon tax than what they get back. More in groceries, more in food, more in home heating, more in transportation, on everything. Liberal, la-la math just not adding up. When will this minister quit using made-up talking points, remove the gag order on the budget watchdog, release the secret report, and end the carbon tax cover-up? Canadians have a right to know.
We have a right to know who the foreign spies are,
Mr.
or
Speaker,
compromised by foreign agencies.
The member has it opposite. The PPO has overestimated the economic impact of carbon pricing on Canada. It means that probably even more than 8 out of 10 families are getting more back through the Canada carbon rebate than they pay in carbon pricing. But this is just another opportunity for the Conservatives to deny climate change. Look, Mr. Speaker, denying the effectiveness and proven impact of carbon pricing is just another form of climate change denial. It suits them and it suits their big oil and gas friends. So, Mr. Speaker, who do they really work for? Canadians or big oil and gas execs?
Big oil and gas execs.
The Honourable Member from Simcoe Grey.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have long known that the carbon tax costs them more than they get back. Do you know who else knows? These Liberals. That's because the Parliamentary Budget Officer revealed this week that the Liberals commissioned a report that confirmed what Canadians already know, that the carbon tax costs families more than they get back. So now the Liberals refuse to release the taxpayer-funded report. Let's end the carbon tax cover-up. When will this minister quit using unbelievable talking points and release the secret report that proves once and for all Canadians are right?
Here, The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, what's no secret is the Conservatives' climate denial. It's no secret, and Canadians know the Conservatives keep and continue to vote against any action on climate change. While our government is implementing solutions that work, i.e. something the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed multiple times, which is that carbon pricing is the most cost-effective market-based mechanism that the Conservatives actually campaigned on in the last election, I remind them. Our government will continue to address climate change while putting more money in the pockets
by taxing Canadians to death. Yeah, something to be proud of.
I'm going to ask all members, please, during questions as well as during answers, to please not take the floor unless they're recognized by the chair to do so. It makes it very difficult for members to hear the questions, especially those who use simultaneous interpretation. L'honorable député de Portneuf.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The cover-up operation is continuing under these Liberals. Another example of the same. At the Finance Committee, the Parliamentary Budget Officer said very clearly that the government has an analysis of the carbon tax impacts, but has been told not to disclose it and not even to mention it. Meanwhile, the Bloc Québécois is constantly supporting the Liberals. It voted against our motion to give Quebecers a holiday tax break. When will the Liberal minister publish his secret carbon tax so that Canadians can learn the truth? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, in the province of Quebec, there is not a federal carbon tax. In fact, Quebec is a leader in the fight against climate change, Mr. Speaker. But the Conservatives are finding yet another way to deny climate change. The government regularly shares confidential information with the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and that's used to produce their reports.
The Honourable Member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, we've seen 12 straight months of record-breaking temperatures, more extreme wildfires, more extreme weather events. This is a climate crisis. Yep. The Liberals have been asleep at the wheel, letting oil and gas CEOs pollute more and more each year. And the Conservatives can't even agree if climate change is real. Shame. The UN Secretary General is calling for a windfall tax on oil and gas profits to help fund climate action. New Democrats agree. But why are the Liberals letting big oil rip off Canadians and destroy our climate?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Over the past 2 years, we've introduced a new clean fuel standard, something Conservatives have pledged to do during the last election campaign, but changed their minds to please their leader and voted against. We've also raised the price on pollution. We're putting a cap on greenhouse gas emissions from the oil and gas sector, and we're the only major oil-producing country in the world to do so. Our emissions are so low that the last time they were this low in Canada was shortly after the Canadians won the last Stanley Cup, Mr. Speaker. But I will say, it'd be nice if when the going gets tough, the NDP didn't vote with the Conservatives on carbon pricing. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I just hope that when it comes time to vote, Canadians do the right thing for the future of our country.
You lose someone and you're trying to grieve, and then somebody else dies. This is the feeling of the Piikani First Nation, who has seen an unfathomable amount of death due to the toxic drug crisis. First Nations in Alberta are dying from toxic drugs 8 times faster than the rest of the province's population. The Alberta Conservative model just isn't working, and the federal government has shown no leadership. When will this Liberal government have the courage to intervene against dangerous Conservative policies and save Indigenous lives?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member opposite that it is a tragedy that we are losing our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers to this toxic, polluted drug supply that we see all across the country, including and predominantly in and amongst First Nations. And that's why our government has invested billions of dollars to support Indigenous-led approaches to mental wellness. We'll continue to work with First Nations leaders on the solutions that will work for them. Mr. Speaker, this crisis has to end.
The Honourable Member from Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the world has seen unprecedented scientific and technological advancement in artificial intelligence in recent years. But this change is plagued by misinformation and disinformation targeting hardworking Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We recently saw how conservatives, like the member from Portage-Lisgar, intend to misuse this technology to mislead Canadians. Could the President of the Treasury Board explain how our government is working responsibly, adapt to these changes, protecting Canadians, their information, and the country as a whole? Thank you.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Now more than ever before, researchers and companies are using AI to create innovations and job opportunities, from drug discovery to energy efficiency and housing innovation. And that's why we have begun to develop the first ever government strategy on AI for the public service, Mr. Speaker, removing barriers and filling gaps for the responsible, transparent use of AI. Mr. Speaker, instead of spreading misinformation, our side of the House is committed to embracing new technologies that allow local businesses, educators, and our broader economy to flourish. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Island and Rideau Lakes.
$123 million handed out to ineligible companies, 186 conflicts of interest, and 76 million taxpayer dollars given out to well-connected Liberals. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, it's clear that this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost or the corruption of his billion-dollar green slush fund. Conservatives are calling for the evidence of corruption to be handed over to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So, will the NDP Liberal government end the cover-up and call in the Mounties?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, the Sustainable Development Technology Canada is an independent organization that's been around for over 20 years, was supported by all members of Parliament at the time. I understand that the Conservatives' opposition to fighting climate change gives them an ideological bent against this organization. But notwithstanding that, the governance structure of this organization, when we learned of mismanagement, we investigated, we triggered numerous independent reviews, including the Auditor General's report, which we collaborated with, and now we're actioning a new governance framework for the organization.
The member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
You almost couldn't hear that answer over the paper shredders that are running over at the billion-dollar green slush fund. We know that in 2017, the Auditor General gave a clean bill of health to this organization that Conservatives stood up to fund clean green tech. But the Liberals got into office and decided to line the pockets of the well-connected Liberal friends. And what did we see with the Auditor General report that Conservatives called for and these Liberals opposed? 186 conflicts of interest and over $100 million being misappropriated. Conservatives want them to end the cover-up. Will they turn over the evidence to the RCMP, yes or no?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
As soon as allegations of mismanagement on Sustainable Development Technology Canada surfaced, our government acted immediately. We triggered an independent review of the governance model, an independent review of the HR practices in the organization. We issued a management response action plan. We've done everything right along the way to address the concerns that rightfully Canadians should expect. The highest standards of governance when dealing with public funds. That's exactly what we're doing and committed to. And the organization is going to be reconstituted within the National Research Council to have better oversight.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, for years now, Canadians are finding it very hard to survive. But the Liberal Party's cronies are enjoying. They are mismanaging the SDTC. and the Liberal Party cronies have managed to grant themselves contracts, $123 million, that were distributed with no respect of the rules. We need the documents. Will the government allow the RCMP to have access to all documents so we can finally shed a light on this scandal? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This question has already received a number of answers. The Canadian government will always work with the RCMP and other organisations. What the member doesn't know yet is that this week was one of great news for Canadians, with the first reduction of interest rates in years. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's be serious. Is the Minister aware that this Liberal Green Slush Fund scandal sounds like the sponsorship scandal in the past? I'm not the one who said this. It's a official that said that the government is wholly incompetent. Will the minister stand again to say, well, perhaps he didn't see something? The Canadians want the truth. They want all documents to be sent to the RCMP. Before I pass to the minister, I would like to encourage all members, especially ministers, to not interrupt when anyone else has the floor. The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable colleague talks about misinformation. The only information that was miscommunicated is that all the reports have clearly indicated that there is no mismanagement. Let us talk about misinformation. My colleague comes from the Quebec City region. Could he ask his leader to apologize for having duped and discouraged the people of his region to sign up to the new dental care system? Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to remind the member for Port-Neuf-Jacques-Cartier that he's already had the opportunity to speak. I ask members to only speak when they are called upon.
There he goes. Trying to power trip again.
Last year was disastrous for our farmers and producers, with 1 farm in 5 unable to service its debts. After months of protests, farmers and producers have been heard by their government, the provincial Quebec government. Now it's Ottawa's turn to listen. The Quebec Farmers Union has warned. In November, Quebec was already asking the federal government to provide exceptional assistance under the Agri-Recovery Programme. Farmers needed it in November. It's now June. When will the minister finally trigger agri-recovery with reasonable compensation and without unnecessary red tape? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we are here for farmers and producers who have lived difficult times. Like my honourable colleague has raised, agri-recovery is a partnership between the province and the federal government, and we are working to see if this programme will be triggered or not. We'll have an answer very rapidly, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Whilst Ottawa was dragging its feet, the food processing company Salade Express in Châteauguay-Lacolle has just closed its doors. Workers were unable to go to work this morning. So after seeds were sown earlier this season, many of our producers learned that they had lost their only buyer. This is on top of a disastrous 2023 season and repeated natural disasters. If Ottawa doesn't wake up and adapt to climate change, 1 in 10 businesses will close within a year. Will the minister finally launch agri-recovery and sit down with producers? We need a fixed date. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and like my honourable colleague knows full well, agri-recovery is done through a federal and provincial analysis. It is done in collaboration with the Government of Quebec. Both work together, hand in hand, and I'm sure that they will have an answer very quickly. But I do understand when we go through a crisis, an answer never comes quickly enough. We'll continue to work with all provinces to make sure that our programs can meet these needs more rapidly.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
Another day, and we're still waiting for the Minister of Employment to introduce us to other Randy, the one who was cashing checks from a company that was lobbying the government, winning contracts, and using the minister's name to do it. That's not allowed. It's illegal. The text messages reveal that someone named Randy at the minister's company was part of a $500,000 fraud. So will the employment minister finally get up on his feet and tell everyone the super secret identity of the other Randy?
It's the shirtless Randy from Trailer Park Boys. Cheeseburger Randy.
The Honourable Minister for Employment and Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, I am all too happy to set the record straight. I have had no role in this company since being elected in 2021. Regarding the day in question, I have shared my phone records to the committee and with the commissioner, which confirms that I am not the person in this story. Mr. Speaker, I have said it. The companies have said it. And now I've proved it. I was not involved. Mr. Speaker, let's get back to working for Canadians and focusing on the real issues.
Full of crap, Randy. We don't believe you. That's the real Randy.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
The minister hasn't proved a single thing.
Yep.
Looking for who he called the other Randy. I'm pretty confident that we don't actually have to look very far because the other Randy might be right here. The one who broke the conflict of interest law, the one who broke the Lobbying Act, and who broke the criminal code. So will the employment minister from Edmonton let us know if Randy is in the room?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister just answered that question.
Oh, shit.
From Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Speaker, here's a story that is a bit randy about a Liberal's excuse that seemed just too handy.
Oh, yeah, I love when he does this.
They just could not resist. But if you're going to blame someone, be sure they exist. The employment minister continues to blame the mysterious other Randy for his ethical trouble. Meanwhile, after 9 years, all this country's problems have actually been caused by the other Justin. Will the person responsible for this scandal, will the real Randy please stand up? Stand up!
I'm going to encourage members not to skate too close to the line in terms of referring to other members by their first names. I understand that that on the first name that was mentioned, that would made sense, but it's the second name that was mentioned that is just skating a little bit too close. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
So, Mr. Speaker, we just got an interesting little behind-the-scenes insight into how this works over there. The minister stood up and comprehensively swatted away all these questions. What followed was 2 more questions that those members are so proud of wittily writing in the morning and rehearsing in front of the mirror that they just have to get it off their chest, Mr. Speaker, even though it was answered 2 minutes ago. That's what's going on in this House. They don't want to talk about lower interest rates. They don't want to talk about 8 out of 10 Canadians being better off. That opposition just wants to talk about their stuff.
What did I miss yesterday?
The Honourable Member for Louis-Hébert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I started in politics in 2015, we were at the end of a decade where Conservatives betrayed young Quebecers by not integrating Davy into the national shipbuilding strategy, and then they hid behind tribunals to justify their inaction with regards to the bridge in Quebec City. Now that we've corrected the injustice for Davy shipbuilding, can the minister tell us how we will continue to work for our infrastructure for our future generations? The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. With pleasure, Mr. Speaker. Hope and good work. Great news was announced on the 15th of May with regards to Quebec City Bridge. We will be saving and restoring this critical infrastructure, which is unique in our world. It's strategic and critical for Quebec. Thank you to the member for Louis-Hébert and the Prime Minister for their leadership and for their work. Thank you to Yvon Charret, our negotiator, and the Chamber of Commerce, and all the people of Quebec who have supported us over the past number of years to get to this excellent result. I've already asked this once. Please.
The Honourable... Merci. The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, contrary to the Minister's representation, he has not turned over all of his phone records and text messages. Text messages reveal that someone named Randy from a company that the Minister of Employment has a 50% interest in was involved in a business deal now mired in allegations of fraud. The Minister says it wasn't him, it was some other Randy. Trouble is, no one can identify who that other Randy is. So has the Minister in the past 48 hours pored over the employment records of the handful of employees at his company to find Randy?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Just when we thought we had heard from the final member who was practicing all morning in the mirror, up stops another one to look straight into the camera over there and relate a question that was just answered several minutes ago. I think these people over there need to be a little more agile. The Minister has answered the question.
The Honourable Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, if the Minister is for Randy in the text messages, then the Minister broke the law, including contravening the Conflict of Interest Act. It shouldn't be difficult to find the other Randy if he exists. If the Minister didn't break the law, then where's Randy?
Where's the Randy they're talking about? What are they scared of?
I just want to remind the member that I'm over here, not over there. But, Mr. Speaker,
Well, Mr. Speaker didn't like that.
You got a crooked minister, and that's all you got?
Wow. Order.
You're laughing.
Order.
Crooked minister, and you're laughing.
I'd like to remind all members
You got crooks over there.
that questions should be addressed through the chair, but members can look where they wish to ask or answer questions. The Honourable Minister, Leader of the Government, has 24 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has responded comprehensively to all of these questions. And what I find a little off-putting in the tone and tenor of the member's question is that in this place we are all to presume each other to be honourable. That is not what that member did, and that member should carefully consider the kinds of words that he uses in this House.
The Honourable Member from Sturgeon Park,
Mr. Speaker,
excuse me,
Superman.
Sturgeon River Parkland.
Randy. We know the identity of these fictional characters, but Canadians want to know who's Randy. The mysterious Randy is in control of a fraudulent company called Global Health Imports, and his business partner, Stephen Anderson, says that he's a public official. And by pure coincidence, the Minister of Employment by the same name founded Global Health Imports and is a 50% shareholder. Now, we just heard the Minister say that he's not involved, but isn't he at all curious about who this Randy fellow is that's committing fraud at a company he owns 50% of? Why won't he tell us who this Randy is?
Should be absolutely furious.
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Well, I'm glad, Mr. Speaker, that this segment has been brought to you by what goes on in the House of Commons. Because here we have yet another Conservative member who toiled over this witty text all morning, looked in the mirror, hoped the leader was there, because if the leader were there, where he might be noticed by him. Then he's going to put it on Facebook. But what he won't do is put this answer on Facebook, happily saving me from 1,000 trolls online. But this member should know better. He asked those questions and presumes.
Oh my God. It's so cringe.
Hey, listen, Canadians don't care about
Order. Order, please. The honourable member from Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, our government works every day to ensure that communities have the vital infrastructure that it takes to be successful. From houses to bridges to community centres to broadband internet, I know our government is investing in communities in ways that truly matter. Can the Minister of Rural Economic Development and the Minister responsible for ACOA share with the House the ways in which broadband infrastructure and stable connection to internet can bolster communities? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, my friend from the Northwest Territories, he knows that reliable internet is so important for rural, remote and Indigenous communities. It's a necessity. This week in La Ronge, I announced our government is bringing high-speed internet to over 13,700 households in 55 communities in northern Saskatchewan, and that includes 3,200 Indigenous homes, and cell service along 500 kilometres of roads too. We're on track to connect 98% of Canadians by 2026 and 100% by 2030. Awesome. This week's investment is a game changer for friends and folks in rural Saskatchewan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Malahat, Cowichan, Langford.
Troubling allegations were revealed this week that some MPs have been willing participants in foreign interference. Despite this, and instead of giving Canadians answers, the Liberals are withholding more than 1,000 documents from the inquiry. And the Conservative leader continues to refuse getting the security clearance that will allow him to be properly informed. Both Liberals and Conservatives are trying to protect themselves instead of Canadians. It's unacceptable. When will the Liberals release all the documents and ensure compromise politicians are not on the ballot?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the question. I think he knows very well that our government and the senior public servants in the Privy Council office and the national security agencies obviously work with, whether it's the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians or the inquiry led by Madame la Juge Hogg, by Justice Hogg. Those senior public servants work to ensure they have access to all of the documents necessary to do their important work. Any redactions or any decisions with respect to documents that are made available are made by senior public servants, and elected people aren't involved in that process whatsoever.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, artists and creatives are deeply underfunded in my community, and much of the gap is federal. While Waterloo Region received just over $3 a person from the Canada Council for the Arts last year, other communities received up to $21 a person. It adds up to a $13 million gap last year alone. This gap has real implications. The KW Symphony filed for bankruptcy last year, and the museum is in dire straits. Will the Museum of Heritage commit to working with all interested MPs to ensure all regions get their fair share of federal arts funds?
The Honourable Minister for Heritage.
Monsieur le Président, ça va être un plaisir de participer avec tous les...
I'd like to participate with all culture lovers. That's why the government has invested more money than ever in arts and culture, because we understand the importance it has for our communities from coast to coast to coast. $31 million for the Music Fund, $32 million for various festivals, money for audiovisual productions. Audiovisual productions will always be here for culture, contrary to the Conservatives who have cut in culture when they were in power. We want big technology companies to pay their just part.
And that brings to an end question period. I wish to
All right, folks, that's where we're going to end this video here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I will see you all tomorrow in some videos, later today in some videos, but I will probably not be streaming Fridays. I usually spend that time with family. So I'll see you guys back on the live stream for Question Period on Monday. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay blessed. Thank you for being a part of the community. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I will see you guys on Monday on the live stream. Bye for now.